Commander Revan Kale awoke to darkness, his head throbbing with a pain that felt like shattered glass beneath his skull. The last thing he remembered was the ambush. His reconnaissance mission to the edge of the Tarsian Nebula had gone catastrophically wrong when his ship encountered the Vexari patrol. As consciousness returned, cold metal pressed against his back and the distinctive scent of alien disinfectant filled his nostrils. He was aboard a Vexari vessel. The door hissed open, bathing the cell in harsh blue light. A tall, slender figure stepped through, her silhouette crowned with a set of horn-like appendages that curved elegantly backward from her temples. As she moved closer, Revan could make out the iridescent scales that covered her exposed skin, shimmering with each movement like oil on water. "The human is awake," she announced, her voice a melodic contralto that contained too many harmonics to be produced by human vocal cords. "I am Lieutenant Madrix, your custodian during your imprisonment." Revan struggled against his restraints. "The Terran Alliance will come looking for me." Lieutenant Madrix's pupil-less violet eyes narrowed, the vertical slits focusing on him with predatory precision. "They will find nothing. Your ship has been destroyed, Commander Kale. As far as your alliance is concerned, you perished in a tragic navigation accident." "Then why keep me alive?" Revan challenged. "Because you were in our territory investigating something you should not have been. Before your execution, you will tell us what the Terran Alliance knows about Project Helios." Revan's blood ran cold. The Vexari shouldn't have known about Helios, the top-secret research into reverse engineering their quantum technology. "I don't know what you're talking about," he lied, his military training kicking in. Madrix's lips curved into what might have been a smile, revealing needle-sharp teeth. "Lies are inefficient, Commander. You will tell me everything eventually. The only variable is your suffering." For the next 3 cycles, Madrix subjected Revan to intense interrogation. Physical torture was beneath the Vexari. They preferred psychological methods, keeping him in sensory deprivation interrupted by blinding lights and disorienting sounds. But Revan's specialized training held. He revealed nothing. On the 4th cycle, something unexpected happened. During one of the brief periods when Revan was permitted rest, the ship shuddered violently. Emergency lights flashed, and the familiar hum of the engines faltered. "What's happening?" Revan called out to the empty cell. The door slid open, and Madrix appeared, her normally perfect posture slightly hunched. "Silence, human. We are experiencing technical difficulties." Another violent tremor rocked the ship, sending Madrix stumbling forward. She caught herself against the wall beside Revan's restraint bed. "Difficulties?" Revan smirked. "Sounds more like you're under attack." "Impossible," she hissed, but the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her. The overhead communication system crackled to life with frantic Vexari language that Revan couldn't understand. But the alarm in the voices was universal. Madrix responded in the same language, her tone sharp and authoritative. When she turned back to Revan, her expression had hardened. "It seems we are experiencing a spatial anomaly. This cell is one of the most secure locations on the ship. You will remain here." As she spoke, the ship lurched again, and this time the power flickered. In that brief moment of darkness, the electromagnetic locks on Revan's restraints faltered. Not enough to free him completely, but enough that he felt the slight give in. The mechanism, Madrix didn't notice. She was too focused on the emergency unfolding around them. "I must attend to my duties. Do not attempt anything foolish, human." As she turned to leave, Revan saw something he never expected. Fear. The mighty Vexari, self-proclaimed superior beings of the galaxy, were afraid. "Lieutenant," Revan called out as she reached the door. "I've navigated spatial anomalies before. If you release me, I might be able to help." Madrix paused, her back still to him. "You expect me to believe you would assist your captors?" "I expect you to believe I want to live," Revan replied. "If this ship is destroyed, I die too." She turned slowly, studying him with those alien eyes. For the first time, she looked at him not as a specimen to be dissected, but as a being with potentially valuable knowledge. "Very well, Commander," she said finally. "But know this, if you attempt escape, I will personally ensure your death is excruciating." As Medrix approached to release his restraints, neither of them could have possibly imagined how this moment would irrevocably alter the course of their lives, and potentially, the fate of their warring species. The ship's corridor was bathed in the eerie glow of emergency lighting as Medrix led Revan toward the command center. Each step sent vibrations through the deck plates beneath their feet. The Vexari vessel was struggling against forces that threatened to tear it apart. What kind of spatial anomaly are we dealing with? Revan asked, his military gait matching Medrix's long strides despite his weakened state. A quantum fracture in subspace, she replied tersely. Our sensors detected it too late to alter course. Revan's mind raced. Quantum fractures were theoretical in Terran science, tears in the fabric of reality that could swallow ships whole. Your engines, are they trying to push through it or pull away? Push through. Vexari protocol dictates. That's your problem, Revan interrupted. You can't punch through a quantum fracture. You need to ride its edge, use its momentum to slingshot around it. Medrix stopped abruptly, her scales shifting color slightly, a physiological tell that Revan noted for future reference. How would a human know this? Your species hasn't even mastered basic fold space technology. Revan chose his words carefully. Let's just say I've had specialized training in theoretical physics. If you want to save your ship, you need to trust me. They reached the command center, a hexagonal room where 6 Vexari officers worked frantically at crystalline control interfaces. They all turned as Medrix entered with the human prisoner, expressions of shock and outrage evident even on their alien features. Lieutenant Medrix explained this breach of protocol, demanded a powerfully built male Vexari whose elaborate head crest marked him as the captain. Captain Nidrek, the human has knowledge of spatial anomalies that may be of use, Medrix responded, her posture stiffening in deference. The captain's gaze fell on Revan with cold calculation. Speak quickly, human. Our ship has less than 15 minutes before structural integrity fails. Revan stepped forward, ignoring the hostile stares. Show me your sensor readings of the anomaly. After a tense moment, Captain Nidrek nodded to an officer who reluctantly brought up a 3-dimensional holographic display. Revan studied it, identifying the swirling vortex of the quantum fracture pulling at the ship. You need to reverse engines to 40%, then execute a controlled roll to starboard while firing ventral thrusters at maximum. The goal is to create a tangential vector relative to the fracture's rotation. That would take us deeper into the anomaly's influence, objected a female officer. Initially, yes, Revan agreed. But the fracture's own rotation will then push us out on a ballistic trajectory, like a stone skipping across water. Captain Nidrek and Medrix exchanged glances, having a silent conversation that Revan couldn't interpret. Finally, the captain spoke. Execute the human strategy. Lieutenant. Medrix, you will be responsible for him. The next 10 minutes were the most intense of Revan's life. The ship groaned and shuddered as it deliberately turned toward the maw of the quantum fracture. Warning alarms blared as structural stress reached critical levels. Several crystal control panels cracked under the strain, sending Vexari officers scrambling for backup systems. Hold course, Revan shouted over the cacophony. You'll feel a massive jolt when... The ship suddenly lurched violently, throwing everyone off their feet. Revan found himself crashing into Medrix, his body instinctively wrapping around hers as they tumbled to the floor. For a brief moment, their faces were inches apart, and he caught a scent like cinnamon and ozone emanating from her scales. Then, just as suddenly, the ship stabilized. The alarms quieted, and the emergency lights dimmed as main power returned. Status. Report, Captain Nidrek demanded, pulling himself back to his feet. We've cleared the anomaly, sir, reported an astonished officer. Hull integrity at 68% but holding. All essential systems functional. The command center fell silent as every Vexari turned to stare at the human who had just saved their ship. Revan became acutely aware that he was still on the floor, his arms around Lieutenant Medrix in what could be interpreted as an embrace. He quickly disengaged, standing and offering her a hand up, a human gesture that she regarded with confusion before rising on her own. It seems we owe you our lives, Commander Kale, Captain Nidrek acknowledged reluctantly. Consider it professional courtesy. Revan replied. One soldier to another. The captain's expression remained unreadable. Nevertheless, the fact remains that you are still our prisoner. Lieutenant Madrix, return him to his cell while we assess our situation. As Madrix led him back through the corridors, Revan noticed something had changed. She walked beside him rather than behind him, no longer treating him as merely a captive to be herded. That was impressive, she said finally, breaking the silence. Few beings would have the knowledge, or the courage, to suggest such a maneuver. Does that mean I've earned a more comfortable cell? Revan asked with a wry smile. Madrix regarded him with those enigmatic violet eyes. It means you've become considerably more valuable alive than dead. Commander. When they reached his cell, Madrix hesitated before activating the door. The interrogation sessions will be suspended while we repair the ship, she informed him. And I will see that you receive proper nutrition and medical attention. As the door closed between them, Revan caught a final glimpse of Madrix's expression, contemplative, confused, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Something that, on a human face, he might have called respect. That night, for the first time since his capture, Revan slept deeply and without fear. What he didn't know was that across the ship, Lieutenant Madrix lay awake, replaying the moment of his arms around her, puzzling over the strange warmth that lingered where their bodies had touched. Days melded into what Revan estimated was 2 weeks aboard the Vexari vessel. His status had shifted from prisoner to reluctant consultant as the ship limped through space, its quantum drive damaged by the anomaly. Captain Niedrek had pragmatically decided that Revan's expertise was too valuable to waste, particularly as they navigated a region of space infamous for similar spatial disturbances. Madrix had been assigned as his permanent guardian, a role she executed with rigorous professionalism that nevertheless seemed to soften incrementally with each passing day. She escorted him to the engineering deck where he worked alongside Vexari technicians, his human perspective offering solutions their rigid training overlooked. Your species adapts quickly, Madrix observed one evening as she returned him to his quarters, no longer a cell but sparse living accommodations befitting his ambiguous status. Most beings would struggle to understand our technology, yet you grasp concepts intuitively. Revan leaned against the doorframe, studying her. The blue-violet scales along her cheekbones caught the light when she tilted her head, creating patterns that he'd begun to recognize as expressions. This particular configuration suggested curiosity. Humans have always been good at understanding our enemies, he replied. It's how we've survived. Is that how you see me? As your enemy? There was something in her voice, a subtle modulation he hadn't heard before. The question caught him off guard. I see you as someone doing your duty, just as I do mine. Madrix stepped closer, her tall frame looming over his. And what is your duty now, Commander, to escape, to sabotage? To survive, he answered truthfully. And maybe to understand. That night, alarms blared through the ship once again. Revan woke to find Madrix at his door, her scales pulsing with stress colors. We've encountered a Sarcine raiding vessel, she explained tersely. They prey on damaged ships. The captain requests your presence. The Sarcine, pirates and scavengers known throughout the galaxy for their brutality. Even the Terran Alliance gave their territory wide berth. In the command center, tactical displays showed a predatory ship circling the crippled Vexari vessel, like a shark scenting blood. Captain Niedrek acknowledged Revan with a curt nod. Our weapon systems are at minimal capacity, the captain stated. The Sarcine know this. They're demanding our surrender. Revan studied the tactical display. Your shields are still functional, at 30% capacity. And your communication array. Niedrek's crest flattened in confusion. Fully operational, but the Sarcine use a frequency modulation system for their targeting computers. Revan interrupted. If you can generate a precise electromagnetic pulse through your communication array, synchronized with your shield harmonic, you can temporarily blind their systems. The tactical officer looked to her captain. It's possible, but we'd need to drop shields for 2.3 seconds to reconfigure the array. Too risky, Nidrek dismissed. Not if you time it with their weapon's recharge cycle, Revan countered. Sarsine plasma cannons have a 4-second reset. All eyes turned to him, suspicion evident. How would a human know such specific details about Sarsine weaponry? Madrix spoke before anyone else could. I vouch for Commander Kale's expertise. Her declaration silenced the room. For a Vexari officer to vouch for an enemy combatant was unprecedented. Captain. Nidrek studied both of them, his ancient eyes unreadable. Proceed with the commander's strategy. The next minutes were tense as the crew prepared the pulse. When the Sarsine ship fired its first volley, the shields flared bright, absorbing the impact. Now! Revan called as the enemy weapon dimmed for its recharge. The shields dropped. The communication array discharged its electromagnetic pulse. For 2.3 terrifying seconds, the Vexari ship was completely vulnerable. Then the shield snapped back online. Just as the Sarsine ship began to drift, its systems temporarily paralyzed by the pulse. We have 4 minutes before they recover, Revan advised. Enough time to reach the nebula where their sensors will be useless. The bridge crew worked with newfound respect for the human in their midst, executing a perfect retreat into the gaseous clouds of a nearby nebula. The Sarsine vessel, upon recovering, searched briefly before abandoning the hunt. Later, as the excitement subsided, Revan found himself alone with Madrix in an observation lounge, watching the swirls of purple and blue nebula gases outside the viewport. You vouched for me, he said quietly. That carries weight in your culture. Madrix didn't look at him. It means I have tied my honor to your actions. If you had been wrong, both our lives would be forfeit. Why take that risk? She turned then, her violet eyes meeting his. Because in the 2 weeks I have guarded you, I have learned more about human nature than in all my years studying your species as an enemy. You value life, even Vexari life, above victory. Not all humans are like that, Revan admitted. Nor are all Vexari like what you believe us to be, she countered. They stood in silence for a long moment, the barrier between captor and captive, alien and human, enemy and ally growing thinner with each passing second. That night Madrix escorted Revan back to his quarters as usual. But at his door she hesitated. I find that I cannot sleep, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Since the quantum fracture, when you held me, my mind replays the moment endlessly. Revan's heart pounded in his chest. What does that mean for a Vexari? It means I am compromised, she replied. My duty requires your continued imprisonment. My self finds that increasingly difficult to reconcile. She turned to leave, but Revan caught her wrist, the first time he had initiated contact. Her scales were smooth and warm beneath his fingers. Stay, he said simply. Just to talk. After a moment's hesitation, she entered his quarters, the door sliding shut behind her. Neither of them knew it then, but that night of conversation, learning about each other's worlds, beliefs, and lives, would be the first of many, and the beginning of something unprecedented in the long, bitter history between their species. The damaged Vexari ship, the Nezath, had been drifting in the nebula for nearly a month. Repairs progressed slowly, hampered by limited resources and the corrosive gases that penetrated the hull through microscopic fractures. Captain Nidrek had reluctantly expanded Revan's access privileges, allowing him to move about most of the vessel with Madrix as his escort. Their relationship had evolved into something neither could define. By day they worked side by side, Revan offering insights on repairs while Madrix stood guard, maintaining the appearance of captor and captive. By night, they talked for hours in his quarters, their conversations ranging from the philosophical differences between their species to personal histories neither had shared with anyone before. Your military record indicated you were a simple reconnaissance pilot, Madrix said one evening, her long fingers tracing patterns on the viewport as nebula gases swirled outside. Yet you possess knowledge of quantum physics, Sarsine weapons, systems, and Vexari technology, far beyond what such a position would require. Revan looked up from the technical schematic he was studying. Perhaps your intelligence on Terran military structure is flawed. Perhaps, she agreed, turning to face him. Or perhaps you are more than you claim to be. Their eyes met in the dim light of his quarters. They had grown comfortable with silence between them, no longer feeling the need to fill every moment with words. Would it matter? He finally asked. If I were something other than a reconnaissance pilot? Madrix moved closer, her tall frame casting a shadow over him. It might. The captain has received new orders from Vexari High Command. We are to rendezvous with a diplomatic vessel once repairs are complete. Revan felt a chill run down his spine. Diplomatic? Yes, it seems your capture has attracted attention from the highest levels. They wish to interview you personally. The implication was clear. High Command would employ interrogation techniques far beyond what Madrix had used. Techniques from which there would be no return. I see, Revan said, keeping his voice steady. How long until repairs are complete? 3 days. Perhaps 4. Her scales shifted color slightly, a pattern he had come to recognize as distress. Revan, The door chime interrupted whatever she had been about to say. Captain Nedrek entered, without waiting for a response, accompanied by 2 armed guards. Lieutenant Madrix, you are relieved of duty, he announced. The human will be placed in secure containment until the diplomatic vessel arrives. Madrix's posture stiffened. Captain, I must protest. Commander Kale has proven himself valuable to our repairs. His continued cooperation is no longer required. Nedrek cut her off. We have received additional intelligence about our prisoner. He is not merely a reconnaissance pilot, but a specialized operative with the Terran Alliance's Quantum Intelligence Division. Revan kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he cursed. His cover was blown. The QID is a myth, Madrix argued. Terran propaganda to make us fear shadows. Nevertheless, he will be secured immediately. The captain gestured to the guards. Take him. As the guards moved forward, Madrix stepped between them and Revan. Captain, I invoke the right of responsibility. The prisoner remains under my custody until transfer. Nedrek's crest flattened in anger. You invoke ancient law over direct orders? I do. Madrix's voice was iron. By our traditions having vouched for him, his fate is tied to mine. A tense silence filled the room. The right of responsibility was rarely invoked, but when it was, even a captain could not override it without severe consequences. Very well, Nedrek finally conceded. But he is confined to quarters with enhanced security protocols. And Lieutenant, your career may not survive this decision. After they left, Madrix turned to Revan, her eyes hard. Is it true? Are you QID? Revan hesitated, then nodded once. Yes. And Project Helios? A Terran initiative to reverse engineer Vexari quantum technology, he admitted. But not for the reasons you think. We're not looking to build weapons. Madrix paced the small quarters. Then what? Communication. Instantaneous, across any distance. The kind that could prevent misunderstandings that lead to war. She stopped, studying him. You expect me to believe your military invested billions in technology just to talk? I expect you to consider what happens when species can no longer hide behind distance and time, Revan replied. When every decision is made with full knowledge of its consequences. Madrix sat heavily on the edge of his bed, her normally perfect posture slumping. In 3 days you will be transferred to High Command. They will extract everything you know and then you will be executed. Unless I escape before then. Her head snapped up. That would be impossible. Not with help, Revan said quietly. The implication hung between them. Madrix stood abruptly, moving to the far side of the room. You ask me to betray my species. I ask you to consider whether blind obedience to outdated hatred serves your species, Revan countered. You've seen inside my mind during our conversations. Madrix, you know I'm telling the truth about Helios. Even if I did believe you, she said, her back still to him, the security protocols the captain has implemented would make escape impossible. Revan moved to stand behind her, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her scales but not touching her. Nothing's impossible. Not when we work together. Slowly, Madrix turned to face him. For the first time since they'd met, he saw naked vulnerability in her alien features. "If I help you," she whispered, "I can never return to my home." Revan took her hands in his, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Then we'll find a new one, together." That night, as the nebula gases cast shifting shadows across his quarters, they formulated a plan. It would require perfect timing, intimate knowledge of Vexari systems, and a level of trust between them that defied their species' bloody history. As dawn cycle approached and Madrix prepared to leave his quarters, maintaining the illusion of their formal relationship, she paused at the door. "Revan," she said, using his first name openly for the first time. "If we succeed, what then?" He crossed to her, and in a moment of either madness or clarity, pressed his forehead to hers in the traditional Vexari gesture of deep trust. "Then, we change everything," he promised. The escape plan hinged on three crucial elements: the nebula's interference with the ship's sensors, the scheduled maintenance of the auxiliary power grid, and the fact that Madrix's genetic signature had command-level access to most systems aboard the Nizath. What they couldn't anticipate was Captain Nidrek's growing suspicion. "He's moved the timetable forward," Madrix whispered as she entered Revan's quarters under the pretense of a routine security check. "The diplomatic vessel will arrive tomorrow, not in 3 days." Revan absorbed this news with outward calm, though his mind raced through contingencies. "Then we move tonight during third shift rotation. The escape pod protocols have been changed," she continued, her scales shifting to a deeper blue, anxiety. "Nidrek has required dual authorization for any launch. Can you get a second officer to help?" Madrix shook her head. "None would risk it, but there is another way." She hesitated, then added, "Though it comes with significant risk." "I'm listening." "We don't need an escape pod. We need a maintenance shuttle." Her violet eyes locked with his. "I can pilot one, but we would need to cross 3 decks of heavily guarded space to reach the shuttle bay." Revan considered this. "The maintenance cycle for life support begins at 0200 hours. That creates a 3-minute window when the security systems reset." 3 minutes to traverse 3 decks, Madrix calculated. Nearly impossible. "Nearly," Revan agreed with a grim smile. "But we have one advantage they don't expect." "What's that?" "They still think you're my guard, not my accomplice." The plan they crafted was audacious. At precisely 01:55 hours, Madrix would arrive to transport Revan to a secure interrogation room on orders from Captain Nidrek. The timing would coincide with shift change, maximizing confusion. When the life support systems reset at 0200, temporarily, disabling internal sensors, they would divert to the shuttle bay instead. As the hour approached, Revan found himself watching Madrix prepare with a strange mixture of admiration and concern. She moved with fluid precision, checking her weapon, adjusting her uniform to regulation perfection. "If we're caught," he said quietly, "tell them I coerced you, that I threatened you somehow." Madrix paused, turning to face him fully. "Do you truly believe I would sacrifice your life to save my own?" "I believe you should have the option." She moved closer, her tall frame towering over his human one. "Revan Kale, in my culture, when one pledges oneself to another's path, there is no turning back. I have chosen to walk with you wherever that leads." The simple declaration carried weight that transcended their differences. Impulsively, Revan reached up, his fingers tracing the delicate scales along her jawline. To his surprise, they flushed warm beneath his touch, shifting to a color he had never seen before, a deep luminescent violet with flecks of gold. "What does that color mean?" he whispered. Instead of answering, Madrix leaned down, pressing her forehead to his in the Vexari gesture of connection. But this time she added something new. Her lips, softer than he would have imagined, pressed briefly against his in a kiss that bridged their worlds. When she pulled back, her eyes held a new certainty. It means I cannot sleep without you near. It means you have become essential to me in ways I cannot fully articulate. The admission hung between them, fragile and monumental. Before Revan could respond, the ship's chrono beeped softly. 150 hours. It's time, he said. The first part of the plan went smoothly. Madrix arrived with restraints, making a show of securing Revan's wrists, while leaving the lock disengaged. She marched him through the corridor past guards who barely glanced at the familiar sight of the lieutenant escorting her prisoner. They were halfway to the shuttle bay when the life support systems reset at exactly 200. The lights flickered, the security monitors went dark, and they increased their pace from a walk to a run. Security checkpoint ahead, Madrix warned as they approached a junction. 2 guards, standard protocol. Can we go around? No time, follow my lead. She slowed their pace, resuming her role as stern captor. When they rounded the corner, she nodded to the guards. Priority transfer on captain's orders. The guards exchanged glances. We weren't notified. Communications are affected by the system reset. She cut in smoothly. Check with command if you wish, but the captain will not appreciate the delay. Her rank and natural authority might have carried them through, but at that moment, the worst possible complication arose. Captain Nedrick himself appeared at the far end of the corridor. Lieutenant, Madrix, he called out, his voice sharp with suspicion. Why are you moving the prisoner during maintenance cycle? Everything hinged on the next few seconds. Madrix straightened to perfect attention. Captain, I received orders to transfer him to interrogation room 4 for preliminary questioning. Nidrek's eyes narrowed. I issued no such order. The captain reached for his communication device, but before he could activate it, Revan made his move. In one fluid motion, he slipped his hands from the loose restraints and tackled the nearest guard, wresting the energy weapon from his grasp. Madrix reacted instantly, disarming the second guard with a precision strike that left him unconscious. She whirled to face Nidrek, her own weapon drawn. Captain, please don't force my hand, she pleaded. Nidrek's expression hardened. You betray your species for this human? Why? I betray nothing, she replied. I serve a greater truth than the perpetual hatred we've been taught. For a tense moment, it seemed Nidrek might fight. Then, surprisingly, his posture relaxed slightly. You truly believe that? I do. The captain studied them both, ancient eyes calculating. Then he stepped aside, gesturing toward the shuttle bay. The diplomatic vessel carries members of the High Command. If they capture you, death will be the kindest outcome. Medrix's scales pulsed with shock. You're letting us go? I am allowing the consequences of your choices to unfold. Nidrek replied cryptically. Now go, before I reconsider. They didn't wait for further explanation. Sprinting the remaining distance to the shuttle bay, they boarded a maintenance craft designed for nebula navigation. Madrix's hands flew over the controls, initiating launch sequences while Revan secured the hatch. Why would he let us escape? Revan asked as the shuttle hummed to life. Madrix shook her head, concentrating on the launch. I don't know. It's not consistent with... Alarms blared throughout the bay. Over the ship's communication system, Nidrek's voice rang out. Security alert. The prisoner is escaping with Lieutenant Madrix. All personnel to Shuttle Bay 1. Revan smiled grimly. He gave us a head start. Perhaps he understands more than he admits, Madrix replied, engaging the thrusters. The shuttle shot forward, bay doors opening just wide enough to allow their passage before slamming shut behind them. The nebula swallowed them immediately, its dense gases providing cover from the Nezath sensors. As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, Revan moved to sit beside Madrix at the controls. Where to now? The nebula connects to the fringe territories. Neither Vexari nor Terran forces patrol there extensively. We can find passage to somewhere. Neutral. Revan nodded. And then? Madrix turned to him, her scales glowing with that same violet gold hue he'd seen earlier. And then we build something new. Together. As the shuttle disappeared deeper into the nebula's protective embrace, pursued by a Vexari warship and facing an uncertain future, one thing had become irrefutable. Neither of them could imagine sleeping another night without the other by their side. 1 year later, the border station known as Haven floated in the neutral zone between Terran and Vexari space. Originally an abandoned mining outpost, it had been transformed into a diplomatic sanctuary where representatives from both civilizations could meet without officially acknowledging each other's legitimacy. At its heart was the quantum communication array, the first successful implementation of Project Helios. Revan stood before the device, watching as its crystalline components pulsed with energy. What had begun as stolen Vexari technology had evolved into something entirely new. Through the collaborative genius of scientists from both species, the array could transmit instantaneous messages across thousands of light years, bypassing the traditional subspace channels that took days or weeks. "The Terran delegation has arrived," announced a calm voice behind him. He turned to find Matrix in the doorway, her scales shimmering with anticipation. In the year since their escape, she had adapted her appearance, wearing a combination